You're sitting in front of a movie app, hundreds of titles, all available, and suddenly you realize you've spent 20 minutes scrolling without choosing anything. It's not a feeling of freedom, but a feeling of oppression, as if having everything at your fingertips has created a silent prison where no door seems to be the right one. If you recognize yourself in this story, know that you are not alone. Feel free to share your experience in the comments if needed. This is because the human brain isn't designed to explore an infinite number of possibilities. It's programmed to choose from a few options and move on. However, today we live in a world where every decision, even the simplest, generates hundreds of alternatives, and each alternative raises a latent question. What if this isn't the best one? You open the giant menu and secretly wish someone else would choose for you. You sit down at the table. The menu arrives, 5 pages, 15 categories, 60 dishes, and from the very first second, you feel something strange. It's not excitement, it's exhaustion. Your brain has already started working before you've even read the first line, because it knows you'll have to compare, weigh the pros and cons, imagine, eliminate, en deep down, or you slowly flip through the pages, feigning interest. But in reality, you're engaged in a full-blown internal negotiation. This one looks good, but what if I get tired of it? The other one is lower in calories, but is it worth it? What if I order something simple and then regret not taking a risk? Every dish ceases to be food and becomes a decision that needs justifying, and decisions are exhausting. So, you do something you'd never admit out loud. You wait for someone to suggest it first, because if someone else chooses something that seems good to you, you can simply do the same. It's not laziness, it's relief. It's an opportunity to transform an individual choice into a shared, validated, reassuring decision. Deep down, you don't want more options. You just want someone to tell you, ask for it. It'll work. And then you breathe a sigh of relief. The more options you have, the more you postpone the decision, pretending to still be doing research. You open 3 tabs in your browser, then 5, then 12, each with a different possibility, a product, a training course, a travel destination. You tell yourself you're being cautious, responsible, smart, but the truth is quite different. You're putting off the decision and you're using the search as an excuse, because doing your research doesn't hurt, it's safe. When you compare prices, read reviews, watch videos, you're not making a mistake. You're simply better informed. The problem is that information always seems insufficient. There's always one more detail, one more opinion, one more perspective you haven't yet considered. And the more you search, the more reasons you find to keep searching. Time passes, days, weeks, and you still haven't decided. Not for lack of information, but because deciding means taking a risk. It means closing all other doors and keeping only one. And as long as you continue your search, all doors remain open. You haven't failed. You haven't made a mistake. You simply haven't chosen yet. And in this hesitation, there is a dangerous comfort. You've already made a choice, but you keep looking at other options just to make sure you don't miss out on anything better. You finally made your decision. You clicked the button. You added it to your cart. You checked the box. But instead of feeling relieved, you feel a strange unease. The decision is complete. Something is saying, so you go back. Just to double check, just to be sure. You reopen the list of alternatives. You examine the other models. You reread the descriptions. You compare the details to what you had already bought. And each time another option seems interesting, a nagging doubt creeps in. What if I was wrong? What if the other one is better without me realizing it? Your initial choice ceases to be a decision and becomes simply one possibility among others, which you haven't yet completely ruled out. This process is endless. you can go back 10 times, 20 times, always finding a new angle, a new doubt, a new justification to reconsider the decision. Because in reality, you're not looking for confirmation, but the absolute certainty of having lost nothing. And that certainty doesn't exist, so you keep searching. And the more you search, the less confidence you have in the choice you've already made. The freedom to choose from 1,000 things gives a greater feeling of confinement than when there were only 3. You've always been told that freedom is having choices. The more doors you open, the freer you are. But life has offered you 1,000 doors, and you've discovered something no one told you. Too much freedom paralyzes you, because every door you open means closing all the others, and closing doors hurts more than you can imagine. When there were only 3 options, the choice was simple. You weighed them quickly, decided, and moved on. There was no room for deep regrets, because the alternatives were few and clear. But now, with 1,000 possibilities before you, each decision carries the invisible weight of everything you're leaving behind, and that weight doesn't disappear. It remains, whispering, "What if you had chosen differently?" We're beginning to understand that prison and lack choice but en excess, because while options were scarce, we were forced to accept and move forward. Now, we live in a permanent state of maybe I should have chosen something else, and this feeling doesn't liberate us. It traps us in a vicious cycle where no decision seems definitive enough. You cancel your plans because you spent too much time hesitating between options that were all acceptable. You had the evening free. Several options were available: a movie, a bar, meeting up with friends, a walk. Everything seemed reasonable. Nothing seemed perfect. And there you were, searching for the ideal option, the one that would be most worthwhile, the one you wouldn't regret. And while you hesitated, time slipped by. Half an hour turns into an hour into 2, and suddenly you realize it's too late for any of the options. The movie has already started. The bar is full. Your friends have already left. And you're home, in the same place you were when you first started to hesitate. Not that any option was good, but because none was good enough to dispel the doubt. What should have been a night of experimentation turned into a night of indecision, and you know it. You know that any choice would have been better than no choice at all. But in the moment, it seemed impossible to accept mediocrity when there was a chance, however theoretical, of finding perfection, so you waited. You weighed the pros and cons. You compared, and in the end, you were left empty-handed. And the silence of that wasted night weighs heavier than any bad choice. After finally making your choice, you end up thinking, what if I had chosen the other one? Rather than appreciating the one you chose. You've finally made your decision. You've bought it, you've reserved it, you've confirmed it. The decision is made. But instead of relaxing and enjoying it, your mind wanders. It goes back to the options you dismissed, to the possibilities you left out, and it starts to develop alternative versions of your choice. Version tâte now seem better. It's strange. You're experiencing the consequences of your decision, but you're not fully present. Part of you remains elsewhere, imagining what things would have been like if you had made a different choice. The restaurant you didn't go to seems more appealing. The movie you didn't see seems more captivating. The trip you didn't take seems more unforgettable. And what you actually chose fades, diminishes, is tarnished by the shadow of what could have been. You try to convince yourself that you made the right choice. You look for signs of confirmation, small details that prove it was worth it. But doubt has already crept in, and it persists. It whispers softly, but relentlessly, perhaps the other option would have been better, and then you realize that you don't appreciate what you have. You only compare what you have to what you lost, and in this silent comparison, nothing ever seems enough. You envy those who have fewer choices because they seem more carefree and more decisive. You observe someone leading a simpler life, fewer choices, fewer possibilities, fewer opportunities, and you feel something unexpected, envy, not for what they possess, but for the image they project, lightness, determined, serenity, as if the absence of alternatives has given rise to a clarity you had long since lost. They don't spend hours choosing what to eat. They don't spend days comparing options. They don't live in that constant state of did I make the right choice. They simply choose and move on, and then you realize there's a freedom in that, a strange, paradoxical freedom, the freedom that comes from not having so many choices, the freedom of not having to justify every decision in the face of hundreds of invisible alternatives. You would never dare admit it out loud because it sounds false, like giving up on progress, abundance, modernity. But deep down, you know the shoe had less, fewer choices, fewer paths, fewer voices telling you that you can have it all, because having it all also means bearing the weight of choice. And that weight, you understand now, is heavier than any limit. The more important the decision, the more the abundance of options is used as an excuse for not deciding anything. There are small decisions, and then there are decisions that change everything. And strangely enough, it's the big decisions that we postpone the most, not for lack of information, nor for lack of time, but because the multitude of options becomes an impenetrable shield. As long as there's a possibility to consider, we avoid facing the real decision, changing careers, breaking up, moving. Each of these decisions opens up a vast range of possibilities, and you explore them all. You research. You imagine every scenario. You talk to people who have made different choices. The more you explore, the more complex the situation becomes. New nuances emerge, new variables arise, and the decision, which should become clearer, seems to recede further and further, because deep down, you know it perfectly well. While you're considering all the options, you're not really making a decision. You're circling around it, keeping it at arm's length, and the multitude of possibilities offers you the perfect excuse. I'm still analyzing. I haven't seen all the alternatives yet, but the truth, the one you don't dare say, is quite different. You've seen enough. You simply don't want to choose, because choosing means losing the illusion of control that the abundance of options gives you. You know that 80% of the options are useless, but your brain insists on analyzing them all before acting. You look at the list, you know rationally that most of the options don't really matter, that many are practically identical, that some you would never actually choose. Yet your brain refuses to move to the next step. It wants to see everything, compare everything, as if there were an invisible rule forbidding you from deciding before analyzing every alternative. It's exhausting, because we know where it's going to lead. We know that in the end, we'll have to choose between 2 or 3 main options. But we can't just jump right in. We have to review the other 20 first. We have to read the descriptions that don't interest us. We have to consider the possibilities we've already dismissed outright, as if skipping steps were cheating, as if the decision were only valid if we'd suffered enough to get there. And then something unsettling dawns on you. The analysis has become a ritual. It's no longer about finding the best option, but about engaging in a mental process that gives the impression of being responsible, prudent, in control of the situation. Even if this process changes nothing, even if you already knew the answer before you even began, you have to review all the options, because stopping halfway seems irresponsible. And so, every decision, even the simplest, transforms into a pointless mental marathon. Ultimately, you don't want more options. You want someone to tell you this is the one you need and relieve you of the burden of choosing, you've reached the end of this long mental journey. After comparing, weighing the pros and cons, analyzing and reviewing, after opening 20 tabs, reading 50 reviews, and imagining 30 different scenarios, and you realize that what you truly wanted from the beginning was simple. You didn't want more information. You didn't want more options. You wanted someone to make this decision for you. It's not laziness. It's not immaturity. It's exhaustion. The exhaustion of living in a world where every choice, even the most trivial, has become a veritable case study, where you can no longer order food, buy a product, choose a film, without feeling like you're missing out on something better. You need someone who knows you, understands the context, and can confidently say, choose this. It will work. And then, finally, you can stop thinking, because the burden lies not in making bad choices, but in the ceaseless act of choosing, in the constant doubt, in the feeling that every decision can be optimized, improved, reconsidered. You are not seeking perfection, but peace. And peace, as you have discovered, does not arise from a multitude of options, but from choosing a single one and placing your trust in it, something that has become almost impossible when the world has given you everything, but has forgotten to teach you how to stop searching. You live in a world that sold you a beautiful lie, that having more choices would always be better. This freedom was synonymous with abundance. The more doors you opened, the freer you would be. But you discovered, in the silence of your postponed decisions, that this isn't true, that sometimes having everything at your fingertips makes you more of a prisoner than when you only had the bare essentials. Paralysis doesn't come from lack, but from excess, from the invisible weight of 1,000 possibilities jostling in our minds, from this perpetual state where no choice seems definitive, because there's always another option waiting, whispering, promising to be better. And then we realize that life wasn't waiting for us to find the perfect choice. It was simply waiting for us to choose and move on. Perhaps the clarity you seek doesn't come from further analysis. It comes from accepting that some decisions simply have to be made, that you can choose what's right rather than waiting for perfection, that closing doors isn't a failure, but rather freeing up the space needed to finally live the life you've chosen, and that ultimately the best decision isn't the one that eliminates all doubt. It's the one you make, accept, and allow to transform you. If this inner journey feels familiar, know that you are not alone. And if you wish to continue exploring these invisible patterns that we all experience but rarely acknowledge, subscribe to the channel. New videos every week.